Okay, so now we are going to look at what it looks like to work with ratio and proportion. So we've got a carpenter bonding two pieces of wood together with epoxy resin, and she must first mix the epoxy with the hardener. So she mixes these materials in a ratio of 10 to 1. So we've got our ratio right here of 10 to 1, where there are 10 parts epoxy to 1 part of hardener. So this ratio can be written as 10 to 1 or as a fraction. Okay, so here we've got it 10 to 1. You can write it as 10 to 1, or as a fraction, which looks like 10 to 1. Make sure that we have both numbers there when we're talking about a ratio. Okay, important thing, comparison between two numbers, this is what a ratio is, they have the same units. Okay, so if we have 10 cups, for example, of epoxy resin, then we've got 1 cup of hardener. All right, so if the carpenter wanted to use 150 parts of epoxy, she would need 15 parts of hardener. So give her a ratio of 150 to 15 between the amount of epoxy and the amount of hardener. So you can write this as 150 to 15 or 150 to 15. This ratio can be simplified to 10 to 1. Okay, so essentially what we're doing, what number, just like we simplified fractions, what number goes into both 150 and 15? Well, you can divide both the top and bottom by 15, and you're going to get 10 to 1. When we're doing calculations, we usually express our ratios as fractions. So like this, and when you state two ratios are equal, you've written a proportion. So 150 parts of epoxy to 15 parts of hardener is the same as saying 10 parts epoxy to 1 part of hardener. So this is a proportion. We have got two ratios that are equal. So let's look at our next example. In example 3, we've got Charles working as a cook in a restaurant, and here's his chicken soup recipe, but he wants to make it home for mom and dad. This is obviously going to make way too much soup, so he just wants to know what the ratios are between the quantities so he can just make them smaller. So what's the ratio between vegetables to chicken? Well, let's look first. You'll notice all of these are in cups, so all our units are the same. So vegetables to chicken, well, we've got 5 cups of vegetables and 3 cups of chicken. So we can write it like that, or you can write it as 5 to 3, or you could write it as 5 to 3, but that's not particularly useful, so we'll use one of those first two. What is the ratio of broth to vegetables? Well, we've got 11 cups of broth, and we have 5 cups of vegetables, or you could say it's 11 to 5. C, chicken to rice. So we've got 3 cups of chicken, and we've got 3 cups of rice. Well, 3 to 3, we could say that is the same as 1 to 1. Or you could say 3 to 3 is equal to 1 to 1. We've divided both by 3. And then D, what's the ratio of chicken to the total ingredients? Well, first of all, we need to know how much do we have in total, because we don't have that anywhere. So we've got, excuse me, 11 cups of broth, 5 cups of vegetables, 3 cups of rice, and 3 cups of chicken. Yes, you have to include the chicken in the total because it's part of it. And that equals 22. So we want the ratio of chicken to the total ingredients. So chicken is 3 to 22, or we could write 3 to 22. Now you can go on to the next questions.